All right, thanks for joining us tonight for our Genius Hour question and answers. We have some great educators from throughout the United States that have agreed to let us know how they've implemented Genius Hour and answer some of our questions. So we'll start with Jennifer. If you'll go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
I'm Jennifer Dreffel. I taught fifth grade the past 2 years. Last year was my first year implementing Genius Hour. And then this next year I'll be fourth grade, and we're out of Spokane Valley, Washington.
Great. And then next is Joy.
Hi, I'm Joy Kerr. I'm in Illinois, near O'Hare, and I teach 7th grade LA, and I just finished my 3rd year full-time for Genius Hour.
Awesome. And Sarah.
Hello. I teach 6th grade English in Montgomery County in Maryland, and it was my first year implementing Genius Hour last year.
Awesome. Jacqueline Rose and Andy McNair are trying to join us, but they're having some technical difficulties, so they may pop in a minute. But if you ladies would answer the question of how do you begin Genius Hour? So Joy, would you like to take the question first?
Sure. You go slowly. You go very slowly. You build rapport. You find students' skills and talents. You talk using the lingo for growth mindset. And as for specifics, you can start with Dot Day in September. You can read The Dot by Peter Reynolds and ask students how they're going to make their mark this year. You could do paper blogging to find out what their passions are. You can create heartbreak maps to see what breaks their heart about their passions. My favorite, after we do many of these things, is to embark on the cardboard challenge in October. I show the video about Kane's Arcade, which is made out of cardboard, and my 7th graders always ask, can we do this? And I'm ready to say, sure, let's do it, and I have it on the calendar anyway. But this day itself gives us much to discuss and remember throughout the year. And the habitudes that Angela Myers describes in Classroom Habitudes, hi.
Yay!
Those habitudes, we talk about the whole rest of the year. So it's like imagination, perseverance, curiosity, adaptability, courage, and self-awareness and passion. So that just drives the rest of our year. So that cardboard challenge is my big kickoff, but it takes us through October before we actually talk about what Genius Hour is.
Wow. Okay. Sarah, how about you? How do you begin?
I actually really like your approach, Joy. I dove in this past year, pretty simply. I just showed, I didn't tell the students much except that, we're going to introduce Genius Hour, and they all wondered what it was, and I just showed a video, which I can probably share a link with everyone afterwards, but very simple video, like a PowerPoint, but not even like a multimedia presentation. It just kind of like builds suspense, like what if you could learn or spend your time learning about whatever you want. What is your passion? That of course not just whatever you want, but what is your passion? And it builds up. And the kids, like I stopped it, and the kids were just like, they're 6th graders, and I think they're used to a lot of just everything being given to them, and so they were so excited. And then I kind of let them, do some collaboration and brainstorming, and they had to sign up via Google Forms with their initial topic ideas, and then I met with them individually to develop like a question that they were trying to answer, and then they had to come up with what their end product might be. So it was, I guess, then a slower process or slower rollout before we actually started working on them, and we even built up to a proposal before we started working on the project. So.
Okay. Jennifer, how about you? Do you start the same, or do you begin in a different way?
Yeah, it was very similar. I found just via Google search passion project PowerPoint, and like Sarah had said, they were just very excited to be able to choose what they were going to study and study wherever they want versus just being told we're working on the American Revolution or we're working on this. So we did that, and the big thing we emphasized at the beginning was having a fact question, a question that's just not a yes or no answer, something that takes some time to research, and I would have to approve their question. So I would keep track of it on a spreadsheet so I'd know what date they started their question, and then would know kind of keep track of their progress on the project, because I didn't have a deadline, and I know a lot of people do. I liked not having a deadline because some people take on a huge project that takes a really long time, and others just want to start out simple. So it worked out that way to keep track of it on a spreadsheet.
All right, great. And Andy, thank you so much for joining us. How about you? Well, first, will you introduce yourself since you didn't get a chance to?
Yes. So I'm Andy McNair. I'm so excited to be here because I was having technical difficulties and was afraid I wasn't going to make it. So it's so good to see you guys and actually get to talk to you face to face. So I'm excited. So I actually teach gifted education at a small rural school in Texas, and Genius Hour is really our curriculum. It's what we use. It's what we do all the time, all day. So I'm blessed that we're able to do that. And so we start Genius Hour by, this year we're going to read What Do You Do with an Idea, which is an awesome book. My principal actually gave it to me last year, and I love it. And so we're going to read that to kick off this year. Usually we just start with throwing out ideas, and then in Joy Kerr's Live Binder, there is a bracket by A.J. Giuliani, and we love using that bracket because it has the kids narrow down things that they love and then things that bother them. And so when those two things come together, we're able to look at those and say, okay, so what do you love doing and what bothers you, and how can we tie those two things together to make a really great project? So that's kind of where we start. And last year I actually had the projects last an entire semester. And so I feel like I had a little more control over the projects than I want to. So this year I'm not going to have deadlines. I'm going to let them, if they complete a project, we're going to move on to something else. I'm not going to make them last a semester if they don't need to. And if they need to last longer than a semester, then we're going to allow that to happen too. So,
Can I ask a question, actually? So if you,
Absolutely.
for those of you who don't have deadlines, I guess, and I wonder if it's different depending on what grade you teach, but if some students finish their project, maybe present it, and then others are continuing, what do the students who finish do during like their Genius Hour time?
In my class, they come up with a new project. They come up with a new essential question, and so that's where the spreadsheet comes in really handy because I know who's finished, how long their project's taking, if they've made progress. So yeah, they just start another project. So I had kids who are really independent would finish like, I don't know, 8, 10 projects a year. And then I had one girl who finished her first project in May, and when she presented to the class was in awe. They were like, wow, this girl who doesn't finish anything made the most amazing project. She put music to art into this whole slideshow presentation, and she didn't even have the music until it started. And all the kids wanted to copy it afterwards because they thought it was amazing. So for kids who just aren't those traditional students, I feel like the Genius Hour Passion Project time is just, it's amazing. I had a lot of parents thank me because they never had an experience like that before.
That's great. Thanks for answering.
All right, Jacqueline, do you want to ask them question number 2?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so another question. And by the way, I'm Jacqueline Rose. I teach 5th grade at Austin Elementary. It's in the Weatherford District as well. I was having some Wi-Fi issues, so sorry about the glitch there at the beginning. Okay. One of the questions that we had also gotten was how you keep students on task, or how they keep accountability so that it's not free time. Because if you're starting this in a school or someplace where it's not really familiar, it's viewed often as free time. So how do you keep your students accountable? And let's see, Andy, do you want to start and share a little bit?
Sure. I hold my students accountable by using Trello. I tweet about that all the time, so I'm sure people are sick of hearing that. But I am a huge fan of Trello and just how wonderfully it ties in with Genius Hour. And so my students actually track the standards that they're learning through their projects. So we do our KWH LAQ as one list, and then they have a math list, a reading list, a technology list. And so they have to tell me what standards they are learning throughout the year by working on their project on that Trello board. So at the end of every class, they are responsible for blogging to reflect and then updating their progress on their Trello board. And that way I don't feel like I'm standing over them all the time and making sure they're doing things. They're kind of responsible for their own learning, and they can design that however they feel like is best for them.
Good, that's good. And it really puts their control back on the students, which is great.
Yes.
Jennifer, what about you?
I found a nice Genius Hour where you talk about getting your question, and then it's a little circle I found online. And so we just put it on in the back of our room and put their names on little magnetic sticky tape. And so they would just kind of track where they were in the process, whether they're still researching or whether they're picking the format, whether they're going to make a video to present or a PowerPoint, or we're going to make a poster. They got to choose how they present their information. So that helped. I would keep track of names, and I would kind of keep track of 5 kids a day and touch base with them. So I'd touch base with every kid, once a week or so, and just kind of see where they were at. So even though we only worked on it 1 day a week or twice a week for half-hour times, I would still touch base with them just to see where they're at and if they needed help. So.
Good. And that's a really good visual marker, too, as well, for those students that need to be able to see that big picture, to see that, I guess, endpoint in their projects of sorts.
Yeah.
Okay, and Joy Kerr, and I'm a huge fan as well, so would you like to please share with us as well some ways that you keep your students accountable?
It's that question. It's such a huge question in education, isn't it? Like the golden question, how do you hold your students accountable for this time that you're giving them? It's like a gift, and you're supposed to be covering the content. Where's your content? And so I think the real question is, how do you account for this time in your curriculum? Not how do you hold the students accountable, but what makes it worth it, I think. And if you're sitting one-on-one with students each week, the vast majority of them will still want to learn. They will want to work. They will want to produce. And the students who are working on something they love, you don't have to worry about keeping them accountable. I think the hard part is finding the something that they really want to work on. And even with all you try, if you try grades, reflections, extra time at lunch, and you have about 10 to 20% of your students who are still not doing what you expect them to be doing with this time, because this is new for them, and this is with so many kids, especially when I get them at 7th grade, they haven't been asked this yet, and they don't know what to do. So I feel like the kids who are playing the school game, they have a hard time of it. The kids who usually struggle with school sometimes have a hard time of it. But consider asking yourself this, if the students aren't working, consider this. Are you giving them time to practice this lifelong skill of learning? Because it hurts me when the kids don't work, and I will have 1 or 2 a year out of my 70 that don't do the work. And I feel like this is a gift I'm giving you, and I'm holding you accountable, but how? I can do the reflections and the blogs, and I can start grading them, which I would hate to do, but they're not going to do it anyway. But I think I'm giving them this practice, and I keep reinforcing that you're going to have to be doing this in life. This is how you get by in life. So I feel like even if they're not rising up to my standards of quality work, I'm giving them that practice time, and we're trying it out. So, and I am going to share on the chat on the side the different processes. When, who was it? Jennifer was talking about that circle. I think it's in this this website I've got for you. So I'll put that in the chat, and then Amanda and Jacqueline can distribute it later. But there are so many different processes that teachers use for that.
Okay, and I completely agree with that, and I think that it goes back to students are taught to be so compliant and taught to be good students, and so when we holding them accountable, really it's how are you going to motivate them? So that's, I think, largely brought in by what the students are motivated by. Are they truly, like you said, making use of this gift is what it really is, that you're giving them to kind of explore, or being more compliant where you have to measure them in a certain way. So yes, I completely agree, and I love the way you put that. What about you?
Sarah, you're muted.
Oh, yeah. Sarah, you're muted.
Okay, there we go. I know I was clicking it. My computer was being funny. But, so yeah, I mean, Joy really well said. Everyone kind of covered a lot of the things. I love the idea of the circle. That's such a good visual. I would add 2 little things. One is that I have students in the beginning of each Genius Hour time really think about what they hope to accomplish in that time, because sometimes the big picture becomes overwhelming. I know we all have those students who need chunking of assignments, things broken down. So, and it's hard for them to do it for themselves, but they get better as time goes on. And at the end, again, I have them look back, like, what did you accomplish of your plan? What didn't you? Why? It's not always a bad thing. And it really does sort of prepare them for, like you mentioned, Joy, like real life. I mean, when you're at work, no one's standing over you all the time saying, here's what you have to get done right this minute. you have to kind of plan yourself what you're going to get done at what time. So that's one thing. And the other, this is sort of a fun classroom management tool I'm sure a lot of you already use or know about, but I do use Class Dojo as a team tool. So during Genius Hour, if their class is a team, and they kind of help each other, positive peer pressure. If for some reason someone is off task, they lose points. But I honestly usually end up just adding a lot of positive points, or when I see people collaborating, when I see students really just on task and focused or asking good questions. So they compete against my other classes. I have 140 students. So it's a nice way to kind of bond the class too as a team. So that's another little tip that I have.
I just wanted to add something too, if that's okay. I think one thing I discovered this year that was important is that it's okay for the students to get off track and fail, if you so to speak, because then I talk to them, I'm like, well, why aren't you making progress? What's going on? Are you studying something that you found is boring? It's okay to abandon a project and pick a new question. And so I had one kid who was doing all these PowerPoints, and everything he was putting on it was just copy and paste. And it was about really nothing. And I go, well, why do you keep doing this? He's like, well, I love doing PowerPoints. I go, do a PowerPoint on how to make a PowerPoint. And it was like this light bulb. Oh, and so he started screenshotting and showing how to do transitions and animations. And he ended up becoming our tech guy for the class. And anytime anyone wanted to make a PowerPoint, he was the go-to kid. So I think that whole process of just learning how to be self-motivating, and it's okay to fail, and then have that conversation about, so what happened? It's okay that this happened, but how can we make it better next time? And I think that's really powerful for the kids.
Definitely, I agree. It's very powerful for them taking ownership of that as well. One thing I want to share that I use in the classroom as far as grade-wise, we kept Genius Hour journals, and every week they would have to set a goal. Well, they would have set a goal the previous week, write it out, and put detail into how they were going to achieve that goal. The following week, whenever we would have our Genius Hour, if they didn't meet their goal, then they would have a moment of reflection and write why they didn't meet that goal, what they're going to do differently. Maybe it was a little too lofty, maybe they were kind of overthinking what they had to do, and readjust and set a goal, taking the previous goal into consideration, set a goal for the following week as well. And that I found helped me, because I would have kids, the kids that were the great students, good at being students, they wanted to have a tactile grade to pin on their Genius Hour work. And even some parents did as well. And while I didn't want to put a grade to it as much, I understand also, though, that when you are starting something like that, and maybe your students or your parents, they do like that grade, and the kids did like it too. And it was kind of a way to keep them on track and keep them somewhat accountable, making sure that they were working towards their goals. So I just took a journal grade and got them writing, so that was nice, and I think they ended up liking that as well. Amanda, what did you guys do to kind of keep your kids on track?
To keep them on track, well, my class was very chaotic, so they weren't on track, and I had some students finishing way before others. A lot of them I felt were off task, and it wasn't until talking to Don Wettrick and kind of learning what the process is, and then I had the pleasure of meeting Andy, and I want to say it was like April or March, so it was too late in the year to start implementing the things that I discussed with her. But this year, I hope to keep them on track by using Trello, Andy's recommendation. I think that that's a great way to keep them on track. But something that came up was grades. And I personally didn't grade their Genius Hour projects because I thought that was their time. I don't get graded by my boss on the PD I do over the summer, reading books and things like that. So how do you guys feel about grading? Do you think that Genius Hour passion projects should be graded, not graded? I do like how Jacqueline took a spin on that and used it as a writing grade. So, for ELA teachers, that's great, but what if you're a math class? And I am self-contained, so I guess I could have a writing grade, but we do have some teachers out there that, just teach one content. So what's some advice you have for them? You want to start, Andy?
I was afraid you were going to ask me to start on this one. That's difficult. I think that's one of the hardest parts of Genius Hour is knowing, do you grade it, do you not grade it? I do not grade ours. The students, like I said, are accountable for their work, and I check their Trello boards. And I definitely have some students even teaching GT that are off task and are not doing things, and that's just me staying on them and meeting with them. If I had to give a grade for Genius Hour, I think I would probably base that on their reflections, and then if it was a class like math or reading, I would require them to, I would share those standards with them, tell them what they were responsible for learning, and then ask them, how are you going to incorporate that into your project? How can you weave this into your project and show me that you know how to do it? And that's one thing I love about Genius Hour is that it's not just, it's not doing it on a worksheet. It's actually applying the standards. It's doing it. And to me, that's so much better than anything else you could do. So I think that's the trick, just getting them to understand that Genius Hour is about applying their learning. And whatever it is that you're teaching or whatever it is they're supposed to be learning in class, have them be creative and tell you how they can put that into their projects. I had 2 students last year that were making pillowcases for some hospitals, and so I knew they were doing fractions in their class. And so when we went to sew the pillowcases, they noticed on the sewing machine that it said 1/4, or no, it said 3/8, and then it said 1/2, and then it said 5/8. And so I just asked them, why does it say 1/2 there instead of 4/8? And so we were able to talk about equivalent fractions. And so I think it's just little things like that, finding ways to weave those standards into whatever it is that they're doing, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. I love your advice. Jennifer, how about you? Did you grade your projects, or do you plan to grade them?
What I did is I found a rubric online and kind of tweaked it, and it was more for those speaking and listening standards and research. And then did they answer their essential, their back question, their essential question, and I just gave them feedback. It was just that verbal feedback on the rubric on what their criteria was, whether, some things I thought they did well, some things that they might want to think about next time, and kind of give them questions, kind of like a coach would. And then the students as well would pick one thing that they learned from the presentations. And so that's how we did it. And then when it comes to report card time, we do have those speaking and listening and research standards on our report card, and we're standards-based grading report cards. So we just sit down and have that conversation with parents and students at conference time and just say, I know that they met the speaking and listening standard because they did this during the Genius Hour time. They also have opportunity to meet it during other times as well, but I wouldn't grade their project per se. I would just give them feedback.
Okay. And then Joy, how about you? Do you grade their projects? I know you're ELA, so you have the writing and everything as well.
I do, but I'm a bad one to ask because I'm going to have the students grade themselves next year. And in our class, it's not about the grade, it's all about the learning, and I say that all the time. And so I hardly grade anything right now as it is. We give a lot of feedback, but I don't put a lot of grades in the grade book. We aren't standards-based yet, but the only grades I do put in are based on the standards. And for ELA, that's the grammar, the writing, the reading, and the speaking and listening. I do ask students to reflect on our 2-week goals that they write for themselves. Jacqueline said something about goals. I do 2-week goals so I can see the kids every other week, make sure I do half one week and half the other week. And it has a number on there. It says 1 through 10, and it has them rate themselves on how well they think they did on their goals. The last quarter, I had some kids that weren't working at all. And I said, what will motivate you? And they said, you don't grade it. And I said, fine, you can grade yourself. So on that 2-week goal sheet, they did grade themselves, and I put it in, I shrunk the points. It wasn't 10 points. I can't do 10 points when all my things are 4 points. But they graded themselves, and I put those small grades in the grade book, and that did help out a little bit. But I can't stand the grades, and I don't want to grade them on their passion. And I tried. A.J. Giuliani had a MOOC a couple summers ago. I don't know when it was, but we tried our own Genius Hour projects, and you've got to try it and then grade yourself. I could not get an A on any of my reflections on my blog posts that I used for the rubric that I had for my kids. So grade yourself and see how you like it, and don't do it to the kids. But when it comes time for presentations, I share a rubric with students, and they know what's expected, but we never look at it again. After their presentation, I don't have another copy to give them, I don't put it in the book. There's a lot of reflection, but not a lot of grades.
Hey, I love it. I'm the same way. Sarah, how about you? Do you grade or are you a no grader?
I am. Unmute. Okay. For some reason, it doesn't like it when I click unmute. So I am a grader. Part of it is the community where I teach. Grades are absolutely important and expected and demanded at times. But I do have the students, again, in the proposal, they talk about, they know they'll be successful when, and they sort of, so it's not grading themselves, but I think I'm going to move a little bit more towards that, where they put out what they want to have by the end to be successful. So again, not a letter grade, but more when I've, for one student, for example, she raised enough money to adopt an elephant and like kind of get the word out about animal rights and hunting, which of course now is very timely with the whole Cecil thing. But anyway, so she was going to be successful when she was able to raise awareness. I think I made her put a number on it if there was a survey given, and also raise the money. So for her, that was part of her grade. Was she successful in doing what she set out to do? Or if she wasn't successful, did she do a good job explaining why she wasn't successful? So I think, and that I also use a rubric, like I think it was Jacqueline mentioned, that I tweaked, where it was more about the process and how they did in the process versus like grading the project or the product at the end. And then one other thing, you mentioned like the English skills. And this would probably go with social studies if you're departmentalized in that way. I'm English, but persuasion. I mean, they saw how important it was. We had studied techniques of persuasion, and they just saw how important that was in their projects. If they were trying to get, to convince people to do something or get the word out or solve a problem, I think that was really helpful. They could see the application of that. So, but I do grade. Yeah.
All right. I like that. How you mentioned that you have the kids, or you're going to have the kids grade themselves. Are you going to provide them a rubric and they score themselves on the rubric, or how are you going to have them grade themselves?
Are you talking to me, Amanda?
Yes.
Okay.
Didn't you say
I don't know.
This year you were going to?
Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to do it yet. I have I have 2 weeks to figure it out. No, I have I've got basics as to what they need to do for the class, but not for Genius Hour. I don't have anything in there for Genius Hour. So for the class, they're going to be rating themselves on their reading, independent reading and reading in class and comprehension, and their writing for argument, and all the ELA standards. I try to compact them into 4 for each one, but I don't have Genius Hour in there. And I don't know, I've talked to a couple people, do you put effort and behavior in a grade? I don't think so, and I don't think I can, since we keep going more standards-based. I think I'll have a reflection sheet for them to fill in, and I'll put that in the grade book, or not in the grade book, in the envelope that goes home. But I don't have anything for grading Genius Hour.
Okay, but I mean, I like that. I like the thoughts going behind it. Jacqueline, how about you? I know you had mentioned you graded the journals. Are you going to do the same thing this year, or do you plan on doing something different?
Yeah, I'm going to keep the journals. That worked well. I agree with what Joy was saying, that it's hard to put a rubric on a student's passion or their internal motivation on a subject, especially if it's a passion that, well, yeah, you just can't really put a black and white rubric, in my opinion, to what they want to do with their Genius Hour project. So that's a way that I found just worked for me in my class, and the students actually seemed to like it because, well, again, the good students, the ones who enjoyed the structure and they want to be compliant and they want to please and do a great job and make straight A's, they liked that because it was something that they knew they could do and they knew the grade that would come with it. It was something that was sure. So it worked well with my class. So yeah, I think I'll probably continue with that one as well. And who knows, maybe with this next group it'll fail miserably, but for the time being it worked pretty well. Okay, and let's see. We had some questions asked about how projects are aligned with standards, and I think that Andy talked about that a bit ago, how she used Trello to align the standards and use the concepts that they were learning to fuel what they were doing and how they were solving those Genius Hour questions and those real-world problems. And I love what you said about applying their learning and showing that it is relevant, because I think that's huge in transfer of the content inside the classroom, is showing them you're going to actually need this stuff later on, and this is how you're going to use this, and see this in your world around you because it's there and it can help you. It can help you solve your problems. And so I loved how Andy explained that. And Andy, was there any particular way, actually this question is really for anyone, but we can start with Andy. Was there a particular way that you set it up so that the students understood how the process worked with which standards they needed to use, or did they come up with their Genius Hour project and then take standards and say, this is how I'm going to apply them?
This last year what we did was I actually showed them the standards, what the teachers see, what we look at, how we know what we're supposed to teach them that year.
I think she's frozen.
She froze.
She's freezing on yours.
All right, it's okay. She'll come back. How about you, Jennifer?
This year, I didn't have any formal way to align the standards, but what I did, the research was the one in the ELA writing standards, definitely the research base, so they had to have different, I would have them cite their research, because in 5th grade that was huge. And they had to have at least 2 different pieces where they got their research from. And then the speaking and listening, being able to present it to the class understands, and then the class would give feedback, you know, if they spoke well, loudly enough. So we had that all on a rubric, and then I always put on, I used the single point rubric, and I just put what standard is there, and then I can give feedback on their progress towards meeting that criteria, or even feedback where I was like, wow, you did this, which was above and beyond, which really helps for standards base to get that exceeding standard. And the students really just liked that specific feedback versus just circling, like on a 4-point scale rubric, just circling what they did. It meant a lot to them. And if there was a time, you know, I was able to fit in a couple of presentations and I didn't get feedback right away, they're like, Mrs. Druckle, I need that feedback. I need you. What did you think about it? So they really, really like that feedback versus just some kids, you know, you slap on like an MT is our meeting standard. They're just like, oh, MT, that's all they care about. But the feedback's just so much more personal. And I think us as teachers like that, and the students do too.
I just want to say one more thing while my computer's working. So can you guys hear me? We're good?
Yes.
Okay. So I feel like one of the huge ways that my students understand how the standards are related to their project is through the outside experts. So when we are talking to an outside expert and that person is explaining how they use math and how they use technology and how they use the things that we're learning in class to do their job, I feel like that's when students really make that connection, when it's like that aha moment of, oh, this is why I need to learn this, and this is what's happening in the real world. That's when I see that light bulb come on and them really be engaged and kind of get it. So the outside experts play a huge role in understanding how the standards apply to real life.
Awesome. And Jennifer, I loved also what you were saying about using the writing standards for the ELA teachers and the research standards. That's a great way to tie it in, even if if they're struggling finding ways to bring in those standards. The way that they're documenting that and the way that they're referencing where they're getting that information is still very important to make sure that they're following copyright guidelines, things like that they will need in the real world. So I love that you tied those in there. And Andy, I 100% agree with the outside experts. I think that's a great way, getting someone that actually does use the stuff that they're using in the classroom and having them show the relevance of it in the real world. Joy, do you have, and you are in Illinois, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Do you put any, or do you have the students show what they're learning via any of the concepts? But you're a GT school, so you don't really have a set of concepts like we have as well.
I don't know what a GT school is.
What's you're in a gifted school?
No, that's Andy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, well then tell us about how
I have,
standards.
I have heard of some teachers saying, okay, what's your project and what standards are you going to work on? They've done that. But I've been, and I'll admit this to you guys and everybody who's going to watch this later, I've been really lax about letting the students do what they want to do. So some of my students create videos, and so it's really hard for them to pull the standards. I mean, they don't even get that they're making a script and they have to write out the script. I have to teach all of that to them. And yes, you're actually using these standards and you're going to use correct grammar and all of that. But so we don't go into the standards for Genius Hour yet. It's one of my goals to do because they do reading, they do writing, they do research, they do debating with others, they do speaking and listenings. But it's right now it's just part of the authentic process, and I haven't connected the standards to them yet. Maybe this year with them grading themselves, they can prove that they're actually learning through their Genius Hour. Maybe they can include that as part of their proof in their digital portfolio. That would be a good idea.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Sarah, what about you?
See if I can get this together. Sorry, 1 second.
You're good. We can hear you.
I don't know if it's my laptop keyboard or what, but so I mean, I think again, like Jacqueline and maybe Joy, where I didn't consciously, look at the standards and say, okay, this is why I'm doing Genius Hour. It was, again, more trying to be authentic, real world. But I will say, like, in my school, we have named units, which is kind of funny for English because it's not really content, it's skills. But one of them is called Challenges and Barriers, and that's the third quarter when we're really kind of in the meat of the Genius Hour project time anyways. So I feel like it was I kind of linked that because we talked about grit, we talked about stamina, we talked about, failing being a good thing because you learn. And so I think I kind of tied that in a little bit as well to the thematic unit that our county has. And I love the idea of having the students kind of find some standards that apply and justify what they're doing. I'm definitely going to steal that and use that next year. But yeah, other than that, it's the some of the language arts standards that are kind of naturally aligned. But I wasn't very purposeful this past year, but I plan to have the students be this year. So thanks.
And that's something that I don't think that we touched on yet, the stamina and the grit to continue, because when they are in the real world, those students will face problems constantly. That's never going to go away. So they need to have that, the stamina and understand to having that problem-solving mentality where they can do something. I think we lost her. Well, she'll come back. That the statement is so important when it comes to those kids pushing through those hard parts of their projects. Okay, Amanda, you have the next question, ma'am.
I do, and we've actually had Ashley Palmetier tweeted out a question to you guys. She wants to know how much time per day or week do you allow students to work on Genius Hour? And we've had this question from multiple people. So, Andy, if you'll start, I know you're a GT class, but if you'll start, and then we'll get everybody's opinion or viewpoint.
Yeah, so I am a GT class, so I do things a little differently, obviously, than a regular education teacher would. I have my 3rd through 5th grade, and those are the students that do Genius Hour, so I have them half a day once a week. So they have 3 hours each week to work on their Genius Hour project. And when we first started Genius Hour, we only did it for an hour a day. But as I started to see the benefits and the things my students were learning and the impact it was having on them just as people, I just talked to my administration and we jumped in just full on. So we do it the entire class period now. So half a day, once a week.
Okay, and Jennifer, how about you?
When we first started, we did an hour a week, and I would do that all in one day. So I would, take the last hour of the day, which actually, FYI, didn't work out very well. The last hour of the day, it seems like morning or right after lunch works the best. But I ended up, because of our computer lab and technology issues, I ended up splitting it. So I would have a half hour in the computer lab, and then another day I would have another half hour where we'd be in the classroom, just to kind of depend on what projects the kids were using or doing. So, because some needed tech and some didn't because they were doing more of a building type project. So it seemed like the half hour one day and then a half hour another day that week worked out the best for us.
All right, and Joy, how about you?
There we go. I have 80-minute blocks, so I have them 5 days a week just for 80 minutes. It's just great for LA. We have Genius Hour the first day of the week, whatever that might be, and then they hold me accountable to have it at least an hour of that 80 minutes.
Okay, so the students kind of just choose what hour?
No, the first day of the week.
Okay.
And then if I'm talking a lot, like talking about what happened on the weekend or what we're going to do this week, they stop me. They say, no, we need an hour. I'm like, all right, that's fine.
Wow, that's awesome. And Sarah, how about you?
Okay, I got it in the first try. Did I? Okay. Sorry, I'm really having issues. Okay. So can you hear me? No?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, man. So I do it on Fridays, and I only have a 47-minute class period. So I give them the class period. I will say they also hold me accountable. I definitely tried to steal Genius Hour time for different things because of, we were running behind or some annoying testing thing that came up. So, but we did it, and it wasn't through the whole year. So I started them thinking about it first quarter, but we didn't really officially start till second quarter. The other thing I want to mention is I do a flipped mastery model for different units within my year where it's not just a flipped classroom, which I know a lot of you probably heard, where like the homework is a video and then they come in. It's not that. It's more almost like in elementary school, like where they have stations. They have 4 different, I call them playlists that they have to accomplish. And they have a week for each playlist, but they get to pick which one they work on when. And I do that I've done some recordings of lessons, and I have all the activities, like usually through Google Docs, like what they need to do. So what ends up happening is if a student finishes one playlist, and they can go on to the next playlist, or they can use that time for Genius Hour. So it kind of, again, gives them that self-monitoring, that time to really have the ownership of what they're going to do with their time. And they loved that. So even if I did sometimes steal a Friday here and there, and even though we didn't have it all year long, some of them had some time to work on it throughout the school year.
All right, I like that. A discussion that came up after, of course, listening to Don Wettrick and how him and Andy are able to do it in their classes, every time they have those students, was maybe for me putting it into like my reading stations, it being one of those 20-minute stations they go to. We do daily 5, and so maybe it being daily 6 instead of daily 5, and they have a Genius Hour station. What are y'all's thoughts on that? Joy, do you have any thoughts?
A station, like to actually have a place for it?
Well, like, so during daily 5, they have like read to self, read with someone, and then like small group with the teacher, like it being of something they did every day.
Yeah, that would be very cool. I don't do stations. I'm really bad at them. I've tried them every year in different ways, and I just can't coordinate it. It's different from my brain. So, but I think that would be a great idea to do. No, I was thinking of a totally separate station of having a box or a junkyard box for the kids to work at when they have extra time, like they want to go through that and make or create. That type of station I can do, but I cannot do no. Doesn't work for me. It would be great for the kids, but I just can't do it.
Oh, I totally understand. Yeah, I would also love to have like a makerspace in my classroom as well. We have a phenomenal librarian, or we did. She's moved on to help the whole district, but she has a makerspace in the library, and it is just amazing, the things that the kids were coming up with that, we knew they were capable, but it was amazing to see it in action. Jacqueline, how about you? How much time do you spend, and how often?
Well, like Jennifer was talking about, how I originally, whenever I pitched it to my principal last year, I said, oh, we'll just do it on Friday afternoon, and that way, they'll still be engaged, even though they're mentally sliding into the weekend. And it was like herding cats for that time, because they are checked out. I'm exhausted. Also, what I found is that they would have so much passion and momentum for their projects, and they would have all these great goals, and over the weekend they would lose that, whether it would be they didn't get be support from home, or they just got distracted or whatever. It just didn't work out. So then I ended up moving it to Tuesday afternoons so that they could have Monday to come and forget all their stuff, which I do. So they would get to school, they would have their stuff, and then remember what they needed to bring, be back on Tuesday, and still have that momentum and carry through the rest of the week. So we ended up staying with Tuesday afternoons, and it was like an hour, I think, an hour, hour and 15 minutes that I would give them. And what about you, Amanda? How long did you have it in your class?
When we first implemented it, it was the same thing. Friday for an hour every Friday. And then we have a crazy schedule on Thursdays only. And so we would have class for an hour, and then the kids' schedule is a little bit different for PLC time for the teachers. And so that it lent itself to a really good hour right before we went into that crazy schedule for the day for them to do Genius Hour on Thursdays. But yeah, it seems that everyone, it's, when they first get into it, it's Friday for an hour at the end of the day or the beginning of the day. Jacqueline, do you want to go with our next question?
Sure. This one. How many students work on a project at? And you start us off.
Okay, so did you say how many students work on a project at a time?
Yes.
Okay. So some of my students, so like I said, we use the bracket by A.J. Giuliani. That's what we start out with. And if I notice a similarity in their project, so like if they're both into sports or they're both wanting to do something to help the homeless or people that are in the hospital, then I will, usually what I'll do is I'll talk to those students and ask them, your projects are similar. Do you think you guys could work together? And we'll kind of have a conference and talk about that. And if they want to work together, then I allow them to do that. If it's a student that either doesn't want to work in a group or just for some reason wants to work alone, I totally allow them to do that. I try not to have a lot of control over that. Sometimes I have pairs of students. I don't usually have more than a couple work on a project together. But for the most part, most of my students work on their own projects just because they're, they want to do it specifically the way they want to do it. So.
All right. Well, that sounds good. Jennifer, what about you?
What I found, I had some students at the beginning who wanted to work together, and it kind of ends up one does all the work and one doesn't. So what I found was best is that if they had the same interests and wanted to work on the same thing. So for example, I had two students that were really into Bigfoot and said they've seen Bigfoot, especially us living in Washington State. They both researched the same thing and helped each other, but at the end they both had their own presentation and came up with their own products. So that way it still held each of them individually accountable, but they could totally work together on the research and that sort of thing. So, and I found that was good because a lot of it's discovering their own passion, and you kind of need to do that individually, but it's totally okay to help each other out. I had another student who was really into building paper 3D models, and he started off doing like kind of a little town, and then he would work on a lot at last recess, and so two other kids started helping him, and it became this, they called it Paper Valley because we're in Spokane Valley, and it became this huge thing, but it was his project, but they just kind of helped him during the last recess. During Passion Project time, they had their own project still, so they kind of, depending on what was going on, I kind of give or take with that, but I think having them have their own product at the end was really important.
Okay. Joy, what about you?
I do let them work in groups if they want, and just like, I think it was, I don't know who said it anymore. You guys are all great. If it's not going to work, the kids sort of figure it out. They know that they want to work with their friends right away and it's convenient. I don't say anything until the group starts to fall apart. And usually the groups that don't work together figure that out on their own. And I love that part of the learning process, because then that translates to the rest of my week. Are you sure you want to work with him again this day, on this stuff? So I love how it transfers, and they usually figure it out on their own. I haven't seen a group of 4 or 5 work great together, except across the hall in my coworker's room. They did a packages for patients thing, and there were 5 girls One of them would do the write-ups for the reflections for the group. One of them would do the interviewing with the experts. One of them would make the connections to get the actual products. So they each had a role, and so we're going to use that next year as a role model for if you really want to work together as a group, what are your strengths and how are you going to help each other out? Yeah. Oh, and I have a picture I'm going to tweet out to your WISD people, that funny group project picture with the 4 guys and the one guy that doesn't do anything. It's hilarious. I'll do that now.
Okay, Sarah, what about you?
Okay, I have to apologize for the squeaking in the background. I have a puppy. So my husband left. I don't know. He's not entertaining him anymore. So I teach middle school, and just like Joy, and I found with my 6th graders that they kind of want to work together, like not too much. That sounds silly. I do a lot of group work and peer work anyways in the classroom, and I felt with this, I think, like, again, like Jacqueline maybe mentioned, that it's their individual passion. I really want them to try to become individuals and not just, oh, well, my friend's doing something about, soccer, so I'm going to do that too, which I find a lot of that with the incoming, the 6th graders. So I actually asked that they work on their own, or not, sorry, let me rephrase that they do their own project and their own question and all of that. However, they're allowed to work with each other and talk. I mean, it's not a silent room. The point is collaboration. And so naturally, you'll find students, even if their topics don't align, giving each other feedback, or can you test out this more, or this Animoto that I made. So I really like that, actually, because, again, I think that sometimes mimics what happens in real life. Maybe you do reach out to someone who's doing something a little different than you, but you learn from them anyways. So that's how I did it this past year. And there's a new course that I'm going to be teaching in addition to English. I was mentioning this before we started. It's called Digital Literacy. Montgomery County is just rolling it out. And it's literally like a Genius Hour, but the whole class, which I'm excited about. And in that, they did teach us in the training about kind of matching students that have similar interests, but again, encouraging them all and requiring them all to have a different, either essential question, like someone mentioned, driving question, whatever you want to call it, and then their own separate end product. So I see both sides of it, and I do so much group work, so I think I kind of cover both. But I have them work or do their own thing.
Okay. I like what you said, mimicking real life. Their problems and find themselves with in a Genius Hour project do mimic their real life, and the problems are going to find once they are released to the real. Amanda, what about you? You're muted.
Sorry, I forgot. My dog was growling. I didn't want people to hear it. But I really love what Sarah said about relating it to real life, and I think that's the best thing. They find their passion, and most likely relate it to real life. But I like how Don Wettrick and Paul, I'm going to butcher his name, maybe? That wrote Learn Like a Pirate.
Yeah, Lars.
There you go. Yeah. I knew I'd butcher it. I'm so sorry. But they both talk about relating your classroom to the outside world and how important it is for our students to have those real-world connections and to connect with other classes through Skype or Google Hangout or even through Twitter. I just think it's really powerful. And one thing that Don does with his students is they have to find an expert on whatever their passion project is about. I believe within 2 days of having the final project of what it's approved, and they have to find an expert. He calls their raw. So I think that that's amazing because then they connect with someone that's in the field that they're studying, and it gives them that real world connection. And my students made some connections this year with some, like an advertiser, and then with a construction company. And every time that they made a connection outside of the classroom, they wanted to show their work to that person, and their work became so much more important to them than if I was the only one seeing it. I think Jacqueline might have lost her connection, but it's been almost an hour, so I want to thank everyone for joining us. And is there any final thoughts or any final advice you would like to give to the teachers of Weatherford ISD that are jumping into Genius Hour this year? Andy,
I think that if I would give any advice, it would just be don't be afraid to fail, and don't be afraid to try crazy things, and just do what you know is best for your students and get their feedback. And if their feedback is positive and they are learning, then you are doing the right thing, regardless of whatever else is going on. So I guess my advice would be just to go for it, and definitely reach out to other teachers. I wouldn't be doing any of the things that I'm doing if it wasn't for connecting with people like Joy and Don Wettrick. That's made a huge difference in just the way I teach and the way I see my role every day. So I guess just don't be scared to try new things and do what's best for your students, and definitely give them the benefit of the doubt, and don't be afraid of failure.
All right, and Jennifer, do you have any advice?
Definitely have to ditto that. I was really scared to try it this year. I did a lot of research, and I'm like, okay, I just got to go for it. I know I'm not going to be perfect. I know the process. I'm going to learn a lot. The students are going to learn a lot just in what works and what doesn't. Get feedback from the students. And at the end of the year, I did an end-of-year survey, and the feedback over and over again, what are you going to remember about 5th grade, or what are you most proud of? Passion project, 9 times out of 10 was the #1 thing they kept repeating over and over again. So it's okay to fail, like Andy said, and just go for it.
Enjoy.
Okay, I ditto Andy, I ditto Jennifer, and I'll raise you one. We haven't said anything about outside visitors or parents. I had a grandma this year, Grammy. She came in 6th period every Monday, and the kids loved her, and she worked one-on-one with students, and just having an extra adult around helps the kids be more accountable, gets another viewpoint on what's going on, gives them ideas. We had Jen Vincent and Drew Goliath, I think his name was. They came and visited this year, and just one student I didn't know what to do, and he didn't know what to do. They asked him one simple question. He's like, I could do this. And just having those extra people around really helps. So if you can get in parents, grandparents, any extra little visitors throughout the week, say, hey, we have Genius Hour, can you come in any period, just come on in. The reading specialist, the speech therapist, whoever you've got, pull them in once a week, and it makes a huge difference.
I totally agree. I'm thinking about myself. I have become a better educator just connecting with other people. So that is very good advice, just to bring even people within our building into it. And Sarah, how about you? Any last advice for our teachers?
Sure. Again, everyone said such great things. I would add one thing I did, which I really recommend if you can do it, is bringing in people from the community to give the students a real audience to kind of present, whether it's their end product or like me, I just did it for their proposals, so they could get feedback from people besides me and even just their classmates, and that involved the parents, got them on board. The principal came and he was like blown away, which was nice, by the kids, but then of course it reflects on you as a teacher, which is nice, and so it really made the kids also work hard because they knew real people were coming in to view their proposals. So I think definitely involving, I think Joy was mentioning, like people from the outside is really recommended for sure. And have fun. Like I just feel like I would tell the kids how much I was learning from them. I really did. I learned about becoming an astronaut and some rocket science, literally. I learned about how to sew. All of these crazy things. So I think that's really good to show the kids that you're learning alongside them.
I agree. It's amazing seeing their passion spread and then learning so much from them as well. Well, I definitely want to thank you. I know Jacqueline does as well for joining us. We are now out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and stop our broadcast. But thank you, and those of y'all in WISD, please connect with these ladies. I will tweet out their Twitter handles under the hashtag YWIC so that you can follow them and they can answer your questions. Sorry about my dogs. And we are finished.